we're okay. Let's
Yep.
see. Okay. All right. See, I told you I was working on it. Um, okay. Thank you for for joining the Land Use Committee meeting. This is the May 8th, 2024 Land Use Meeting of Board One. My name is Elizabeth Arian. I'm co-chair of this committee. Um, And I just want to let you know that this is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube channel for Board One. Before we begin tonight's agenda, I want to acknowledge something that I want to acknowledge basically the changes to the committee. And I want to acknowledge the years and the contributions that Jerry has made to this committee and to the community board. Co-chairing this committee. The work that we did together over the years and with all of the board members could not have been any better and could not have been as much as before as it has been this year and these past years. As you know, um, maybe you don't know, but I have relied on Jerry for his guidance and his technical knowledge and his professional experience many, many times. I have a certain amount of experience, but he has much more technical than I have. And I appreciated that. And I know the committee has benefited from it for many years. Um, as you know, board members now are term limited, and we're both nearing the end of our term limits on the board, our terms on the board. So it's time for us to pass this on. And in that respect, there are many things about the world of zoning and ULURP that really have to be passed on to the new members of the committee and also to whoever's going to be taking the leadership roles. So what what I want to do now is introduce you to some of the changes. First of all, that Andreas Migias has been appointed as the new co-chair, and Jerry will be vice chair. And together, I think the three of us will be trying to work our way and trying to keep you on schedule and knowing what has to be done with all of the the ULURP and the world of zoning and ULURP. So I'm going to be continuing as co-chair with Andreas and working with him and just basically learning what's the responsibilities of the chair of this committee. I also want to acknowledge that the years that Sandy Anagnostou has been on our committee as a public member, and she has brought insight and information to our discussions when we've been talking about BSA, since that's her professional area of expertise. There will be some changes in terms of, I should mention that Sandy was a member appointed as a public member of the committee. And with our new board chair, Evie Hansopoulos, I think there's going to be a review of how public members are selected and appointed. And so we look forward in the near future to see who our public members are going to be. And finally, let's see, I have an introduction to make. We have a new member of the committee, and that is Jacqueline Ibarra. Is she on? I don't see her here.
I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I just don't have you in in all of the thing. Welcome to the committee, Jacqueline. And I hope if you would like to say a word or two.
A brief word. It's a pleasure to join the committee. I just thank you for the appointment, and I look forward to working with everyone. As I mentioned before at our last general meeting, I'm born and raised from Woodside, Queens. Been here, been in Boulevard Gardens, been a resident here for over 20 years. And I'm a proud public school mom, and I have over 23 years of fundraising, capital sourcing experience. I work for a consulting firm at the moment, and I have touched projects having to do with economic development, real estate development, transportation, a number of things. So the public-private sector, public-private partnerships are not new to me. It's pretty familiar, but there's always something new to learn, and I hope to learn from everyone here. So thank you.
Okay, well, I hope you like to read because that's what we do a lot of on this committee. So buckle your belt and get ready. There's a lot coming down the line. Okay.
Thankfully, I have a master's in literature and creative writing, and proposal writing.
Terrific.
So
Great. That's all you need. We'll talk to you soon about your contributions to the committee. Okay, so I think with that, Andreas, do you want to say anything at this point, or?
Sure. I'll just say hi, everybody. My name's Andreas. I'm excited to move forward in this new role. I'm really excited to get to learn more from Liz and Jerry, who have been at the forefront of this, since I started, and for a really long time. And they have the practical knowledge, they have the experience, they have the knowledge of how to do some community board. So really excited to learn how they do it and assist them the best way they can. Welcome to Jacqueline as well, and it's nice to see everybody else's face, the community members I've been seeing every month the past 2 years. Excited to continue to work with you all and learn from you as well.
Thank you. I just want to also acknowledge Jeffrey Martin being a former vice chair on the committee, but he's, I want to thank him for the conversations we've had sometimes in discussing certain things. So at this point, I guess we can go on with the agenda. And the first item, I think, was the 21st Street rezoning. Am I correct? I don't have my agenda in front of me. I have to get one. I have to get it.
Before you go forward, Liz, I just want to make a disclosure that my firm has participated in graphic representations to this application.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry.
Just need the host to enable the screen share as well.
Excuse me, Liz, I as well would like to disclose that the firm that I'm associated with has been involved with this project, although I don't have personal direct involvement, never worked on it.
Okay, thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, are you first up? Are you introducing, or is?
Sure, I can't share my screen right now though, for the presentation. Are you able
Please try again? Try again.
It said host disabled participant screen sharing. I don't know, Joe or Jordan, are you able to screen share?
So it's the same thing.
Yeah, same on my end.
That we can see.
Okay, I got it now. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, members of the Board 1 Land Use Committee. My name is Jacqueline Scarinci of Ackerman, and I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Astoria Park Warehouse LLC, who's the owner of the 2 development sites within the proposed rezoning area. You heard from Joe Lucen, the owner of the site, at the pre-certification meeting, and unfortunately Joe had a conflict tonight, but he's a small business owner in Woodside, where he founded and runs a leading architectural metal and glass company and is very eager to build this project as soon as possible. I'm also joined here this evening from the applicant team by my colleague Joseph Sabaro of Ackerman, as well as Jordan Press and Mackenzie Bouise of Constantinople and Valone. The proposed rezoning that we're here tonight to discuss encompasses portions of block 874 and 876 in Astoria, just to refresh the board's memory. And we are looking to redevelop underutilized and vacant property into 2 new mixed-use developments that will uniquely provide affordable home ownership housing opportunities. We appreciate the opportunity and discussion we had with the committee back in January as part of the pre-certification process, and we're back here tonight as part of the formal community board ULURP process. This aerial shows the 2 development sites that are located just south of Astoria Park on the southern side of 21st Street. Development site 1 fronts right along 21st Street, the major commercial corridor, and development site 2 is located mid-block on 24th Avenue. The sites were zoned R5 and R5 C12 until the Astoria rezoning, which zoned development site 1 to R5D with a C13 commercial overlay and R5B, and development site 2 to an R5B zoning district. Just north of the site, you can see was zoned R7A. That was back in 2002 to facilitate the redevelopment of the Eagle Electric building from an industrial to residential conversion. The building that's there today is a 7-story, 79-foot high building, and it has ground floor retail. It was completed in 2008. You can also see the area to be rezoned that's outlined in a black dotted line extending along portions of the block fronts along 21st Street and 24th Avenue. And I'll get into the rezoning boundaries a little bit further in the presentation. Overall, the land use context within a 600-foot radius is residential with commercial and retail uses along 24th Avenue. Both of these streets are zoning wide streets, 24th Avenue 80 feet wide and 21st Street 100 feet wide. You can see Astoria Park, which many of you are familiar with, a major 60-acre regional park located within close proximity to the site. And it has both active and passive recreation opportunities for any new residential development. And then, the RFK Bridge and ramp are located just further west. To reminds the committee again of the existing conditions, here are some photos of development site 1, which is the former Ricardo's by the Bridge wedding venue, which has been vacant for some time now. Development site 1 is a 15,565 square foot zoning lot with 125 feet of frontage on 24th Avenue and 130 feet of frontage on 21st Street. This building was built back in the 1930s. Here's development site 2, which is an unimproved parking lot that was used by Ricardo's by the Bridge and is currently being used for parking by the neighbors within the area. Here's a transit map just to show that the area is well served by public transportation, including the Q69 and Q100 bus routes along 21st Street and Q19 and M60 select bus routes along Hoyt Avenue. The Astoria Boulevard NW line is located just 8 blocks to the east, just beyond the surrounding area. Here is the proposed zoning change map. As I had mentioned earlier, it's currently zoned R5B and R5D. And the proposal requests a rezoning to an R6A with a C14 commercial overlay. The zoning district boundaries cover development site 1 and 2, but also extend to 23rd Terrace along the block fronts on 21st Street. There are 2 proposed land use actions to facilitate the redevelopment of the 2 sites. The first is a zoning map amendment to change the existing districts to an R6IC14 and a zoning text amendment to establish the project area as a mandatory inclusionary area pursuant to options 1 and 2. Here is a rendering of development site 1 and the proposal, which will be a new mixed-use development with approximately 48,943 square feet of residential floor area, 54 dwelling units, which will include 16 permanently affordable housing units pursuant to MIH option 2. The entire building is envisioned as homeownership, with the MIH component being an affordable home ownership component. There will be 23 accessory parking spaces, and the ground floor will have 6,589 square feet of local retail. This will activate the corridor along 21st Street and then also along 24th Avenue. Here is the development site plan, which shows the residential entrance on 21st Street, and then we've also got commercial entrances on both 21st and 24th Avenue. The proposed building will rise to a height of 65 feet and then set back 10 feet before rising to 85 feet or 8 stories. The proposal will also have 23 accessory parking spaces. Here's another illustrative rendering of the site. And then development site 2 across the street on 24th Avenue will be a slightly smaller building, 35,344 square feet of residential floor area, 38 dwelling units with 12 permanently affordable homeownership units pursuant to MIH option 2, 18 accessory parking spaces, and 7,997 square feet of local retail. And this is also a site plan of development site 2, which will be a new 7-story building. It'll set back at 65 feet, the same height as the building across the street, but will rise to 7 stories. And this is another rendering of development site 2. At the meeting back in January, there was a question regarding sustainability features, and we were able to summarize the proposal for these 2 buildings here. So there'll be a solar-ready roof, energy and sound efficient windows, Energy Star appliances, and energy efficient mechanical equipment. For water efficiency, we're using stormwater runoff for irrigation of planting areas. We'll use porous pavement where possible to minimize stormwater runoff and maximize stormwater infiltration. And we will use low flow plumbing fixtures throughout the buildings. So for the proposed text amendment, this is the mandatory inclusionary housing map, which will map both options 1 and 2 over the proposed project area. This proposal is moving forward with, is proposing option 2, as we had discussed with the board at the last meeting, because in order to Option 2 allows for affordable home ownership, AMI levels that are financeable, because a lot of these homeowners have to obtain, a mortgage. The 80% AMI levels align better with the home ownership program for mandatory inclusionary housing. And so here we have the proposed unit distributions for the 2 development sites. We have for development site 1, we have 4% studios, 37% 1 bedrooms, 46% 2 bedrooms, and 13% 3 bedrooms. And then for development site 2, we have 26% studios, 32% 1 bedrooms, and 29% 2 bedrooms, and 13% 3 bedrooms. I think there's like a strong recognition among the development team that for home ownership, there's, there's definitely a need for family size units, and they were able to balance that with these 2 proposals. And then just to give you the affordable homeownership sales prices based on 80% AMI. This is a calculation that has a formula within the zoning resolution and is further defined by HPD's guidelines. And that is that someone who can qualify for these units and make sure that they're not paying any more than 30% of their income on the expenses for the home ownership units, which is a calculation of common area charges, mortgage payment, and utilities. So for studios, the affordable sales prices would be $225,000, 1 bedroom, $270,000, 2 bedroom, $315,000, and 3 bedroom, $330,000. And with that, I'll ask for any questions. I know, we really did appreciate having good conversation with the board back in January. And I know Jordan followed up with Q&A because there were a number of questions that the board engaged with us on specific to how HPD manages the lottery for the affordable home ownership, and some further questions related to resale and subletting of those units. And we were happy that we were able to get back to the board on those specific issues, but we're here to answer any other questions that the committee has for us today.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. Before you go, could you tell me, could you please introduce the members of your team who were here with you for this project?
Sure. Joseph Sabara is also from Ackerman, Jordan Press, and Mackenzie Bouise from Constantinople and Boulogne. And is Nellie Hennessy on as well? I can't see it. She's on.
I am.
Okay, and Nellie Hennessy is also here from Caliendo Architects. So if there's any specific questions related to the design or architectural components of the building, she's here as well.
Thank you. Okay, first hand up is Richard.
Hi, everyone. Number one, I like the fact that you're starting utilization of the home ownership program. I think it's great. But I still have a question. And from what you just said, you said that you sent answers to the community board. Now, maybe I didn't see it, but I very well might have missed it. But even if I did, I wasn't sure of how the equity was going to be handled, particularly on resales. One of the main reasons that people purchase condominiums and things like this is to gain equity towards retirement or at least equity for use for purchasing for another building. And in this particular case, under the MIH, how is equity handled, considering that the building, of course, when it's sold, has to stay within MIH? I'm assuming it's permanently affordable. And I I'd just like further clarification on that whole process. In general, the process of MIH with homeownership.
Yeah, so I'll take that one, Jordan Press. It is it's written out from the rules of the city of New York in what we sent over, so I can resend it to Florence and ask her to resend it to the committee. But just reading off of it, there are two different calculations for resale price. I'm not going to read the first one because it's a little confusing. But the second one is simpler, which is tying it to the CPI over the ownership period. And HPD noted that they recently calculated a resale price over 6 years that was 23% over the previous sale price. What I would say overall, we kind of discussed this a bunch during the last meeting, is, well, Richard, you're right that homeownership is normally thought of as a, you know, like a means of wealth building. Within this affordable homeownership program, probably a little bit less so, in that we don't want those units turned over where, you know, somebody purchases it and the market explodes, and then they are able to resell it and make a wonderful profit, which is good for them but bad for the affordable homeowner, you know, person who's seeking an affordable homeownership unit. So, you know, it cuts both ways in that sense, that it's not it is not the best means of wealth building the way we think about home ownership, but the resale price restriction does maintain the units as affordable home ownership for the community.
Okay, is there any historical, I mean, what other areas have used this program? Is there any history or anything on how the resales have gone, how the purchases have gone? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, so there's
Never been in this neighborhood before.
there's there's a HPD has a program called Open Door. The first one was in the North Bronx. I don't know how, it's relatively new, opened maybe 3 years ago. I don't know how resales have gone there. On a larger scale is what they call the HDFC co-op program, which is throughout the city, lots of concentrations in like Hamilton Heights neighborhood of Manhattan. There are a few other spots. East Brooklyn has a bunch. And different sets of rules, co-op by co-op, on resale. Like some co-ops will require, you know, large transfer tax fees to it allows the resale price to be higher, but then funnels it back into the building. So the rules are a little bit different location by location.
One last question. Are the maintenance fees controlled?
The maintenance fee, so included in when Jackie was describing the calculations on how they figure out what the sales price are. So the maintenance is calculated in that initial calculation. It's a good question how it would be handled if once the building is a condo and is off on its own, whether the condo board can increase the maintenance fees, like how they can increase the maintenance fees. I know it's in the rules of the city, but I don't know exactly what they are. I
Well,
will try to find that out for you.
okay,
Certainly. I'll find it out for you before full board.
okay, thanks. Okay, it's a new frontier for our neighborhood. That's why I bring this up. Thank you.
Are there similarities, do you think, with how the Queensview Co-op operates?
I don't know how it operates.
Oh, okay. It was, I mean, I understand it was a NYCHA endeavor years ago where they tried the co-op and they kept it at very reasonable prices, long waiting lists, et cetera. And, but eventually it has gone almost market rate at this point. So I don't know if, do these expire with the MIH? Does
No.
the cap expire at all?
No, so the affordable units have to remain, and the resale rules that will keep the prices low remain in perpetuity on those units.
Forever and
think-
ever, even against a co-op board, I mean, a condo board.
Yes, it's within, it's recorded against the property.
Okay,
What the main difference between this, well, what's proposed here and what you described is that only 30% of the units here are affordable, which you know, it probably just creates a little bit of a different dynamic regarding you know, upkeep of the building and a bunch of other, you know, economics. I can't think of them all, but I'm sure there are some differences.
I mean, it is like a risk of the condo that you have the market rate units in the building will be subsidizing the affordable homeownership units in a certain aspect if the maintenance and operating expenses are going over a certain level. And that's part of the offering plan for the building that will specifically state that any like shortfall will be covered by the market rate condo unit owners.
okay, so sort of like the rental where some is offset by the market rents in terms of operating costs and things like that.
Yeah, there's like protections that get put into the condominium offering plan when you have affordable homeownership units within a market rate, like a mixed income building.
But all of the expenses concerning that unit has to remain 30% or below of the income of the occupant.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
that's correct. So the condo board is going to be working with two different sets of numbers, I think. One for
Yeah, and there's
MIA.
other, yeah, sorry, there are other models like this within the city. They're not mandatory, there's not a lot of mandatory projects that are doing it, but they're voluntary, and it's very similar in that they're privately financed projects that have a market rate component.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you for making your presentation again. You will be coming to the board. Florence, the board meeting is the 21st of May. Okay.
I think Jacqueline and I have questions though. Sorry, Liz.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Elizabeth. I apologize for this question. Seeing as the conversation started in January and I just joined the committee, but I'm curious to know two things. One is, is there a GC or a CM already assigned to this? Yes, there is. Could you please share that name?
So the owner of the property, who we mentioned, Jackie mentioned, his name's Joe Lucen. He owns a small business architectural metal in Woodside, just a couple blocks outside the CB1. He's in CB2 by a few blocks. And he has GC projects before. His intention is to GC this project as well himself. But we discussed that sometimes when you get into the financing process, sometimes the bank makes demands. They might want a larger GC, and so he's leaving the door open on that. But currently, it's his intention to GC the project himself.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then my other question was, for both developments, has there been conversation or thought put towards good faith efforts in utilizing local business enterprises for trades, either for the the exterior or the interior?
So this came up in one conversation with Joe. And because he's like a local Queens guy, he said he's, very much in favor of local hiring. I guess I would say broadly, yes, and we need to probably put together a plan. I can ask him, for some more information ahead of the full board, as to exactly how we do it. And, happy to work with the board and the local electeds on, like posting job information, stuff like that.
Great.
But
I look forward
I'll
to
ask him that. Yeah, I'll ask him for that ahead of the full board.
I look forward to that update at the next meeting. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, Evie?
Yeah, so on one of the slides, it did say MIH option 1 and 2. So I just want to clarify, it's only going to be option 2. And is there no possibility for any option 1?
So, the proposal with affordable home ownership needs to be option 2, but we're mapping option 1 and 2. Just because we recognize that the board's preference is for option 1, and if there, there is flexibility in the future if there is a need for option 1 as well.
So is there a possibility that you won't actually build affordable condos, that it might go to rental?
No, I think
I'm just trying to understand.
Their model is to do condominium development. So, and this is how they underwrote the project. So that's what the plan is. And
then my other question was, you talked about the setback and height of development site 1, and then for development site 2, you did talk about a 65-foot setback and 7 stories, but what's the height for that development site? This the one that's on 24th Ave?
75 feet.
75 feet. Okay. And then the third thing, there was a question in the chat about, since it's a condo, are you required to file a prospectus with the AG?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be a formal offering plan.
Thank you.
And it gets reviewed by HPD as well as part of the process. There'll be a restrictive declaration that does a permanent restriction on the affordable housing units, and then when the project goes to get ready for marketing, they have to file with the AG and get a condominium offering plan. And there's specific provisions that HPD requires in the AG offering plan to protect the affordable housing units as well.
Liz, also Dan, who's on the board, had a question. I don't know if you're taking questions from non-committee members, but just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, I don't, can he, Florence, can he connect? Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the phone.
Dan? Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I had a question about once the building is in operation and the apartments are sold, what's the how many years or how many months is it projected to take to sell all the apartments? Now, follow up to that is, during the time they're selling them, will the owner/manager be renting them out in the meantime before selling them? What will happen there?
So to answer your second question first, no. There's a owner occupancy requirement that remains on the building in perpetuity. There can be subletting to an income qualified tenant, but only 2 years out of every 4 years, which is a zoning resolution and City of New York rules, not ours. But no, there is no intention to, and actually I don't believe it's allowed to rent out the units prior to sale. And regarding your first question, I will ask him if he has modeled. I think he'll probably have to talk to whoever his real estate broker is about what the proper modeling should be for vacancy until sales timeline, but typically they start marketing the units, like 8 months or so prior to completion, so that you can start closing on them as quickly as possible.
If a person does own it, can they sublet it out immediately, or must they be in it a certain length of time before they can let it out?
So I have a snippet of the rules on this. By the way, this is also in the Q&A that we sent over, and I'll resend. But the snippet says, the question was, the question that we received from the board in January that I asked HPD was, there's an owner occupancy requirement, does that remain in perpetuity? The answer was, the owner occupancy requirement remains in perpetuity with prior approval. Subletting to an income qualified tenant is allowed for a maximum of 2 years out of every 4 years. So based on that snippet, you would be allowed to rent it right away, but you couldn't rent it for more than 2 years before the owner occupancy requirement would kick back in. But we should probably review the full set of rules to make sure that I'm not missing something outside of this snippet.
What I'm thinking is that there may be some people who get the apartment and then feel that they want to make a little money before they move in themselves, maybe to recoup some of the funds they put out to purchase. And so if there were a significant number of the people of the apartments in the building doing that, it might change the picture of the whole thing.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Dan. Yes, I think, I'm looking at what I have here, prepared by you, Jordan, was sent over, and that was, it doesn't have that information on it, so this must be something else. There are questions, how are sales handled?
Yeah,
was there a truncated one that was prepared for us, and then something else?
Let me see.
Can share it on my screen if you like, Liz. I sent it to everybody. I sent it to Jordan and the team just now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's the same one. So it's the one, it's the second question down, I think.
Okay. All right. So, well, this was sent out to the committee, so, but I don't know, you must have taken it out to the board. Did you send it to the board, Florence?
I just sent it to you all right now, the committee at this moment. Resend it.
Yeah, this went out with your package that you got the other day also. So, all right. You have the questions, so if you can address them at the board hearing, that would be great.
Sure.
I'm sure there will be other questions regarding this from other board members. Evie?
Yeah, there was just a question in the chat about whether or not the neighborhood's been notified of this. And I know that before physical notices used to be posted, and I'm not sure whose responsibility that is to notify people in the area. Or is it a requirement anymore?
There's no requirement for rezoning to notify the neighbors.
There's a requirement that the board notify neighbors of the public hearing that we're having now. So, right.
And we do that through the website. The Board of Standards and Appeals is the only one that notifies individual owners surrounding the project that they're working on. With respect to rezonings, it's just usually such a large area, or no, we don't. To answer your question, there is no individual mailing that is done, at least from our office.
Madam Chair, we do a 600-piece mailing for the full board meeting. We post it on the website. It goes into the Queens Gazette newspaper, the Astoria Post, and the day of the meeting, we post the agenda.
Yeah, I mean,
massively circulated.
There's nobody putting things in, on lampposts and in individual mailboxes, but there is
It's against the law now. They changed
significant amount of notification is done ahead of time. So, okay. If there are no more questions,
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your presentation, and we'll see you on the 21st.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
All right, thanks so much. Second item on the agenda, city planning, I believe. We have Colin, would you like to introduce who is here with you? I think I only saw one other person.
Hi, Liz. Hi, everybody. I have Scott Solomon joining me. He's also from the Queen's office. I'll start out with saying congrats to Andreas and welcome, Jacqueline. Excited to see you guys take more place in the role of the committee. And of course, Jerry, I'm sure we'll still be hearing a lot from you and seeing a lot of you at city planning. But yes, today we're planning to talk about housing opportunity. And before I get started, I'll just say that feel free to drop questions in the chat and I'll have Scott try and reply to some of them if he can, and then we can get back to them at the end of the presentation. So let me bring up my screen. Is everybody seeing the full screen or is it showing the presenter mode?
I can see it.
Yes, I can see it too.
Okay, great. So yeah, as many of you are aware, we are in the third installment of our City of Yes proposals. The first two were carbon neutrality and economic opportunity. There was actually a recent expansion to the annotated text. So for those who have been reading through it thoroughly, like Liz and Jerry, we have just expanded that to include our special districts. But the rest of it does remain to be the same. The goal of this proposal is to enable a lot of housing everywhere in each neighborhood by removing some barriers to housing growth. And so the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is a citywide plan that encourages incremental housing growth over a wide geography. I'll explain how you can expect this proposal to apply in your neighborhood today. So as many of you may know, New York City faces a severe housing shortage. Many of you know this already or experience it, but I'd like to frame it with some statistics. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is historically low, only about 1.4%, which is far below a healthy vacancy rate that would provide New Yorkers with housing options. In Queens, that vacancy rate is even lower at 0.88%. Because our housing demand is greater than our housing supply, New Yorkers are experiencing very high housing costs. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their monthly income on rent. Not having enough homes is also the direct cause of homelessness. On a given night in December of 2023, over 92,000 homeless New Yorkers slept in shelters. This includes over 33,000 homeless children. Most of New York City's housing was created in the first half of the 20th century. Since that time, housing production has fallen dramatically. That's in part because of zoning that has become increasingly restrictive since 1961. While housing production has decreased, the demand for housing has increased. There are a number of reasons for this. For example, households are smaller today than they used to be, meaning even the same amount of people take up more space. What recent housing production has occurred has been limited to only a few neighborhoods. In 2023, 10 community districts produced as much housing as the other 49 combined. I'll note that Queens CD1 is shown in the darkest blue here, seeing some of the highest amounts of new construction in the city. When some neighborhoods stop producing housing, that puts additional pressures on neighborhoods like Astoria to produce more and more new housing. The proposal and housing opportunity emerges from the goals outlined in Where We Live NYC, the city's fair housing plan. Where We Live was created by HPD in collaboration with over 250 community organizations. It highlights how the city's housing shortage and affordability crisis have severely limited New Yorkers' housing choices. In a tight housing market, landlords can charge high rents, and existing tenants are vulnerable to tenant harassment, poor housing quality, and displacement pressure as they compete with each other for a limited number of units. When there are few apartments to choose from, renters pay more. In Queens, 53% of renters are considered rent burdened. These conditions further worsen the neighborhood-based legacies of segregation, discrimination, and concentrated poverty that have led to the deeply unequal city we have today, where neighborhoods have unequal access to resources and opportunities. So for an example here, the average New York City household makes about $70,000 a year, but the average two-bedroom apartment in New York City is over $2,700 a month. This means that your average working family would have to spend about half their income on rent to get a home for their family. So thank you for bearing with me as I give this very lengthy background on our housing shortage. But I want to talk about how city planning can help address some of these things. And zoning is one tool to address the housing shortage. Sometimes zoning includes other things like requirements for income-restricted affordable housing. I know many folks in this room are familiar with how zoning works, but as a reminder, zoning does not fund new housing or directly control what will be built. It only establishes rules for what may be built. How much housing gets built depends on many factors. Other tools the city uses to support good housing outcomes include subsidies or tax incentives to promote income-restricted affordable housing, programs for affordable housing ownership, affordable home ownership, tenant protections that guarantee New Yorkers' rights. Changes to our zoning can respond to these issues by increasing the number and types of homes available in every neighborhood across the city. If each neighborhood adds a little more housing, New York City can add a lot more housing overall without any single neighborhood experiencing dramatic changes or overtaxed infrastructure. This text amendment is one of the biggest pro-housing changes DCP has ever undertaken and would touch the zoning for each single part of the city. The proposals are broken into 4 different buckets: low density proposals affecting R1 to R5 districts, medium to high density proposals affecting R6 to R10 districts, parking proposals, and some other citywide proposals that don't neatly fit into the other 3. I'll linger on this slide for 1 second to allow folks to be more familiar with the low and medium to high density districts in CD1. You'll see in orange is our medium to high density districts, which are located between roughly around Astoria Boulevard and 30th Ave, I believe here. And then to the north, there's more Ditmars, and then to the east as we get towards Woodside. Okay, so onto our low density proposals. Exclusionary zoning rules have made it virtually impossible to build housing in many low density neighborhoods, placing additional pressure on the high density parts of the city to produce more housing. This wasn't always the case. Small apartment buildings and 2 to 3 family homes are common in all New York City's lower density neighborhoods and were allowed in many places until as recently as the 1990s and early 2000s, when stricter zoning prevented them. CHO would reintroduce modest buildings that are more naturally affordable than other types of construction and apartment buildings at a scale in which they can take advantage of existing affordability programs. Together, these changes allow for the creation of more housing in low-density areas without affecting neighborhood character. Our town center proposal aims to create more missing middle housing in low-density areas. Missing middle housing refers to a category of housing that's modest in scale and often affordable to middle-income residents, a once common type of housing that's not often built in the city anymore. This proposal aims to re-legalize mixed-use apartments or buildings with a ground floor commercial use and a few stories of housing on top. This is a classic New York City building type that exists along many low-density commercial corridors, such as 30th Avenue, Ditmars Boulevard, or Steinway Street in CD1. Overly complex zoning rules make it almost impossible to build new ones. The map shows areas in red where the proposal would apply to commercial districts overlaid onto low-density districts. This proposal streamlines zoning rules, including restrictive limits on floor area and height, so that it would once again feasible to build 2 to 4 stories of housing above a commercial ground floor. Our second proposal for missing middle housing is transit-oriented development. Transit-oriented development would allow for low-rise buildings 3 to 5 stories, depending on the underlying zoning, on sites that are near transit and meet specific criteria. First, the site must be on a block within a half mile of a subway or rail station, as shown in gray on the map. Second, the lot must be over 5,000 square feet. Finally, the lot must be located on the short end of the block or a wide street, which zoning defines as being over 75 feet wide. Community facilities like faith-based organizations or libraries can also use these rules without the city or throughout the city on sites over 5,000 square feet where a community facility space is present. Our transit-oriented development rules would promote missing middle housing while also promoting sustainability by adding housing in areas with good transit access. The areas in purple show the affected low-density districts within the greater transit zone. In the rest of the low-density areas, the proposal aims to give homeowners more flexibility. Under this proposal, a 1 or 2 family home would be allowed to add a small accessory or dwelling unit, or ADU. There are a range of types of ADUs, including backyard cottages, garage conversions, and basement apartments. These small units will provide important housing options for small households, like a young person moving into their own place for the first time, or an elderly resident who wanted to age in place. Because of their small size, they also serve different income levels than a large single-family home. Successful ADU programs in other places include Austin, Seattle, and the state of Connecticut. Show us that these units can give multi-generational families a little more space and help middle-class homeowners with household expenses. The proposal includes rules to ensure that ADUs are safe. New basement ADUs would not be allowed in the coastal floodplain, and no ADUs would be allowed in special coastal risk districts, areas of our city with the most severe flood risk. Outside of these coastal areas, basement ADUs may be subject to additional regulations or review. The same rule changes that enable ADUs can also help homeowners who don't want to add an ADU but need to be more flexible to adapt or renovate their home to meet their needs. Our research shows that many existing buildings are out of compliance, meaning they're not in line with today's rules. For example, R41 districts are 2-family districts allowing semi-detached buildings like the ones you see here, but buildings like these pre-1961 duplexes could not be constructed today because they have more square footage than is currently allowed and their rear yards are too small. These non-compliances can cause big headaches for homeowners if they need to borrow money from the bank or if they want to make simple changes to their home, like renovating an outdated kitchen. The proposal would fix these rules, which would have dual benefits. First, homeowners of existing buildings won't run into issues when they go to make an alteration to their building because the zoning would better match what's actually on the ground. Second, you'll actually be able to build a 2-family home in a 2-family district or a multifamily home in a multifamily district, when today the only thing that would be feasible is a single-family home. And now we'll move on to our medium and high density proposals. Our focus in these proposals is on creating more opportunities for housing, including affordable housing. To do this, the proposal introduces the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP. It would allow apartment buildings to be at least 20% larger, so long as all the extra space is occupied by permanently affordable or supportive housing. UAP is modeled from current rules that allow bigger buildings for affordable senior housing in some neighborhoods. This also happens often in this district. It's commonly referred to as AIRS, affordability increase for, I'm forgetting what the acronym stands for now, so I won't try to explain it. But UAP would allow incremental housing growth in neighborhoods and encourage affordable housing throughout the city rather than concentrating it in a few neighborhoods. This map shows which districts have an existing senior housing preference today, shown in the light orange. Throughout the UAP framework, all forms of affordable and supportive housing would be able to take advantage of the higher FARs already provided to affordable senior housing in these districts. However, there are a few districts that don't have the senior housing preference today, shown in the dark orange on the map. In these areas, the proposal would create new FARs to enable the growth of affordable and supportive housing in every neighborhood. The proposal would also make sure that zoning provides room to build the extra affordable housing required through universal affordability preference. So there will be limited height increases where it is necessary to make enough room for these affordable homes. So what does affordability mean for UAP? UAP would have an affordability requirement of 60% area median income. At 60% AMI, or about $76,000 for a family of 3, UAP would serve lower income New Yorkers than the existing zoning tool, voluntary inclusionary housing. UAP would replace voluntary inclusionary housing, or VIH, but mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH, which requires a percentage of new developments to be income restricted, affordable housing, would continue to exist and be mapped where there are significant increases in residential density. UAP would also serve New Yorkers at even lower income levels through income averaging. Income averaging means that instead of only including homes at the required affordability level, a building can also include homes at a range of incomes that average to the required affordability. So for example, a building can meet UAP's 60% AMI affordability level by including a mix of homes at 30% AMI, 60% AMI, and 90% AMI. Through UAP's deeper affordability requirement and the introduction of income averaging, UAP can help to serve the low-income New Yorkers who most need affordable housing. Here's one example of how universal affordability preference works. If a church is located in R6 district wants to build affordable housing today, they'd get 3 FAR, regardless of whether they're developing market rate or affordable housing. This would allow them to build about 35 units. Under UAP, they'd get 3.9 FAR, but the additional 0.9 could only be used for affordable housing. If it is, they can build about 10 to 12 more affordable units. Now, 10 to 12 units may not sound like a lot, but this is functioning at a citywide scale. And I'll remind everybody that we are talking about a citywide proposal that has effects that would go beyond just this district. And if every product has a few more affordable units, New York City can add a significant amount of affordable housing, and no single neighborhood will experience drastic change. This is a rendering of how UAP would play out. Without UAP, the building is built according to the base FAR for market rate housing. The result is this 8-story apartment building. With UAP, the building can be about 20% bigger, which for this example translates to an additional 2 stories, so long as the extra space is permanently affordable housing. So I also want to touch on mandatory inclusionary housing areas, which would remain in place and continue to be mapped when there is a significant increase in residential density. This proposal would introduce some improvements to MIH. First, under this proposal, MIH option 3, previously known as the deep affordability option, would be applied as a standalone option. Today, it has to be applied as an alternate with MIH options 1 or 2. This would allow future actions to ensure deep affordability when MIH is applied. Some MIH FARs would be raised to meet UAP FARs. For example, R6A currently has an MIH FAR of 3.6, which would be raised to 3.9. The options would remain in place, remaining the same percentage of affordability will continue to be required. Finally, the current MIH program is incompatible with the tools that facilitate affordable home ownership. This proposal would exempt 100% affordable home ownership projects from rules that prevent them from penciling out. And now we'll move on to our citywide proposals. The proposal would the parking proposal would make parking optional for new housing everywhere, following the example of many other major cities. Today, New York City requires new housing to include off-street parking, even where it's not needed. The committee might remember that many applications in Community District 1 also include a parking waiver, but the proposed development often includes some level of parking. These mandates, as they exist today, mean less space for housing and increased construction costs, which result in less housing being built. The diagram on the slide represents how parking takes up a lot of space. 2 parking spaces is equivalent to the size of a studio apartment. Building parking itself is also expensive and is an obsolete to housing growth, especially affordable housing. This proposal prioritizes housing over parking. Parking would still be allowed, and we anticipate that developers will respond to market needs and continue to provide parking in areas where there is demand. Removing parking mandates can help reduce the cost of housing construction and enable the development of more homes in each new building. There are additional proposals that will provide more housing and a wider range of housing types, and I'll touch on them in the next couple of slides. This proposal is to make it easier to convert underused non-residential buildings, including vacant offices. Zoning already has rules that make it straightforward to convert non-residential buildings into housing, but these rules have relatively limited applicability. Buildings generally have to be located in New York's densest commercial centers and be built before 1961 to qualify. Through this proposal, we'll simply extend those existing rules to more parts of the city and to more buildings. This will create urgently needed homes in highly accessible locations and also breathe new life into underused buildings. Pardon me. Extending our existing adaptive reuse regulations involves a few discrete changes to our zoning. First, we'll expand the eligible geography to the lighter pink. This eligible geography in CD1 will not change. This will allow for the conversion of buildings beyond just large offices like schools or former religious buildings. Second, we'll allow more recent buildings to have access to our adaptive reuse regulations. Today, a building has to be built prior to 1961 or 1977, depending on what part of the city it's in. To use the more flexible conversion rules, we'll move this cutoff date up to 1990, allowing underused buildings from the 70s and 80s to convert into housing. Finally, our current adaptive reuse regulations only apply when a non-residential building is converting into traditional apartments. But office floor plates, for example, may work better for other kinds of housing like shared housing or dorms. We'll change our adaptive reuse regulations so they can be used to convert into any type of housing, including supportive housing, shared housing, or dorms. And that tees it up to our next proposal regarding small and shared apartments. What this means is allowing buildings with only simple, no-frills studios, as well as homes with private bedrooms, but shared kitchens or other common facilities. These building types have historically played an important role in New York's housing landscape, especially for young workers who need a place to stay while they get their feet under them. Although these buildings provide critical housing, they were banned in the 20th century largely because of prejudice and exclusion. New, small, and shared apartments can once again provide these important housing choices for New Yorkers, especially marginally housed New Yorkers and people who would prefer to live alone but can't afford to do so. Today, we're forcing many New Yorkers into living situations they don't want. In some cases, that's a shelter or doubling up in an overcrowded unit. But our lack of housing options is also what forces young professionals to team up with roommates and occupy family-sized units. Allowing more small and shared apartments could ease the pressure on these larger units. This proposal would also develop clear rules for building shared housing or private homes with private bedrooms, but shared kitchens and other common facilities. Our current zoning does not have a clear path for building shared housing. Creating clear definitions and rules would make this process less complex and enable a fuller range of shared housing options. These rules would make it possible to build shared housing in any multifamily zoning district. This will enable the development of new construction shared housing, including affordable shared housing. These clearer rules can also help to legalize existing unregulated shared housing. Other cities like Seattle and San Diego have already re-legalized this type of housing and found that it meets a need in their housing markets. New York City can learn from these examples, as well as the city's own history, to see the importance of re-legalizing small and shared options. On the contextual infill on campuses, this proposal would also make it easier to add contextual infill to these campuses and other irregular or challenged sites. Previous campus developments often took place under a tower in the park style regulation called height factor. Although DCP has developed a more recent set of regulations for contextual buildings that have height limits and result in better designs, Some sites like NYCHA campuses can't access those rules. The proposed changes would allow height-limited infill on sites that would otherwise be forced to develop tall, skinny buildings or nothing at all. A variety of other changes would address barriers faced by irregular or challenged sites. These changes include making more sites eligible for contextual envelopes, eliminating the outdated sliver law in favor of height-limited contextual envelopes, and updating waterfront rules, which currently make it difficult or impossible to build housing, especially affordable housing. This slide here gives a little bit more background on how the campus infill rules work. I'll note that the majority of campus infill would, or the majority of campuses within Community District 1 are in the low density districts, are in R5 districts. And so the rules reflected with that are create a 50% lot coverage maximum on these campuses and establish a new campus height limit within the R5 district that would be 65 feet. And so thank you for bearing with me or wrapping up this presentation. The changes I walked through tonight are the most significant proposal in the City of Yes for housing opportunity. Overall, this text amendment aims to create a little bit more housing in every neighborhood so that the stress of adding that burden of housing is felt and distributed evenly across the city. It's not just about more housing, though. It's also about more types of housing, multifamily housing where it's currently not allowed because of exclusionary zoning, homes of different sizes to meet different people's needs, and crucially, far more affordable and supportive housing. Thanks again for listening tonight. We are in the just to give you a little bit of a background on our timeline. We are in the public referral period, which will have a 60-day review ending sometime in July. We plan to vote on this in September of 2024 and bring it to a council vote by the end of 2024. And please feel free to use my email, Scott's email, or this email on the web this slide, housingopportunity@planning.nyc.gov. If there's any questions that we don't get to touch on today.
Okay, thank you. I thought, is there any way that you can give us more information that's more specific to the district? We have 40 different zoning districts in our community, and the lowest residential zone is R4. We go from R4, R41, 5, 5B, 5D. That's the low density. But the rest of the 40 zoning districts are mixed use. I don't know how this affects the mixed use zoning districts. And also the commercial districts that have residential equivalent. What one has to do is read the environmental impact statement really to get the information about the existing and the proposed differences that one can expect in each of the districts. And I'm wondering if you can give some kind of a review of that.
Yeah, maybe Scott here. Maybe Colin, if it's okay to jump on this one first. Some of these proposals apply to different districts, and we have some slides in an expanded appendix here to look at them. So, Colin gave a high level and more specific summary of some proposals, like the town center, the transit-oriented development, and how they apply to certain districts. So if there's a particular one we could start with first, maybe the transit-oriented development or the town center zoning on the low density or the UAP, we have some charts available that looks at the different districts. And we can highlight some of those districts that offhand. For the low density, R5 is pretty predominant in the area. We could look at that. Is there one of the proposals you may want to maybe you would prefer to start with?
I also would like you to include the campus infill issue, because we have 4 NYCHA projects, one of which already has a new development on it by a private developer, the Durst project in Ravenswood. So I think the community is going to be very eager to know how this new zoning is going to affect these campuses. And so am I. So, so that's added to the issues. most of what we've been getting, the rezoning requests we've been getting are for in the R7 and R6 context. And so, you know, this is an important thing. We're also seeing a lot of combination with manufacturing, you know, the new MX combinations that are coming through. So this is, you know, for my edification, I would like to know what this is. And Jerry, have you been going through this 1,700 page change?
Of course. That's my job.
You know.
So I think what's relevant to our board, and I made a little chart myself. I didn't publish it yet, but just you have the current FAR, proposed FAR, and then the extra transit sites, transit accessible site FAR, and it progressively goes up. So we have R4, R41, R5, R5B, R5D, R6, R6B, and R6A. That's the predominant districts. And I don't know if you could see that. Can you see that?
No, is it maybe, so we have slide, I think what Colin 65 has maybe a version of what you have here is
Yeah.
the
So basically
FAR.
it goes, the current R4, which is probably the most R4 and R5 in the borough, in the community board. 0.75, you'd use a splay to 0.9. They're proposing a 1 FAR. I read this. This is not, it's hard for everybody to understand. But then R41, 0.75 goes to 1. If it's in a transit, it goes to 1.5. R5 is currently either 1.25 or predominant 1.65. They're eliminating the predominant. And from 1.25 going to 1.5. R5B is 1.35 going to 1.5. And you could see that. So it's there, but it's not there. It's hard to, and you know, my job is to make people bigger houses. So what they didn't do, you didn't change your R6 or 6B or R6A. Am I correct?
So the underlying R6 districts, so the underlying are not changed, but where we have the universal affordability preference, we brought it equal to the heirs numbers where you provide affordable housing.
Right.
But something that another part of the text is we've also added new districts that, you know, this isn't a rezoning, so we're not establishing them on the map, but we're adding to fill in the gap that, Jerry, you're probably really familiar with between the FAR gap in between R6B and R6A oftentimes, or even R5. So we have an R6D that is proposing to add this new district that will allow a 3.0 FAR. Oftentimes projects get bumped down, and it provides opportunity to, you know, provide some moderation between sort of the menu of zoning districts. I really appreciate what you had written out, because it combines several of the charts that we have. So we have an overall low density district fixes. So maybe, and Colin, thank you for navigating the slides. Maybe we can go to slide 55, and that's just the general low density fixes. And this has some of the materials that a reference that you were talking about. You had also referenced the implication of the TOD FARs, which are different. So so for those single family districts, the FAR currently is 0.5 for like the R1s to R2A, and that's going from 0.5 to 0.75, like you said. We're also reducing the rear yards from 30 feet to 20 feet, which has actually slowly been mapped throughout the city, the R2X district. So it's something we already have in our toolkit. It's something that we have in Kew Garden Hills, Far Rockaway, Midwood. It's these districts that allow for these larger homes because we're going to be providing extra floor area. So these are some of the low density fixes, you know, speaking towards what Colin's talking about, but allowing single family homes being built in single family districts and two-family homes being built in two-family districts, reduce some of these minimum lot sizes. So, I was at a BSA hearing yesterday for CB12, and the site was at, and it's just, it's just an anecdote and a sample, but that property was, I think 2,900 square feet, and then the minimum for the R2 was 3,800 square feet. So this is something where it would now facilitate the development there on that site. So we have the lot minimum lot size difference. We have step ups in the floor area, and then so that's the low density fixes. That's what the map these low density districts today would provide this additional flexibility. And then we also have this additional floor area for the TOD and for the town center. So the town center is essentially allowing the equivalent of an R5 district along commercial corridors. And the map that Colin had shown earlier didn't show all the commercial corridors because a lot of the commercial corridors of CD1 are already mapped alongside R5 and above already. And this is where that middle missing middle housing comes in. So we expect for that town center. Thanks for navigating there. I'm gonna follow along with you there.
Scott, I'd just like to add a bit more of a community district one kind of spin on this, is that like, especially in our R5 districts, I know Richard is always talking about Ravenswood. Like part of this proposal is to help facilitate development. What we see a lot in those R5 districts is that it's not really a district that encourages any type of development unless it's like a single family home, even though it is really intended to be a multifamily district. So we're hoping that these minor or more modest bumps to the base FAR would permit or encourage people to actually build something there that's residential instead of the current manufacturing uses that exist.
Okay, we have several. Jerry, do you have any other comments to make? What about the middle range?
Right,
I
my
mean, that's
question
where
is
we're
what-
going. That's where we're going. We're going from the lower density to a middle range at this point. So,
I wanted to just ask Scott, and when he mentioned about the middle between R6B and R6A, what is that called?
I think Colin, I think we're on slide 79. I
Is it
think.
R6D or R6-2?
Yeah, so we have this R62, which has a basic FAR of 2.5, and when you use the universal affordability preference, it goes to 3. And for R6D, it's also 2.5 and goes up to 3, but they have different height requirements. I think the R62 is more, I think it has a sky exposure plane, and the R6D has a lower height than what like the R6A would allow, an 8 to 9 story building. So that's filling that gap between that R6B and the R6A. And just recently, we don't have it here. There's an application in the Bronx that's introducing this R61 that's also fixing that distinction between narrow and wide streets for R6 districts. That's something that's already moving through already, may have already been approved.
okay.
And one more thing, Scott, on these lower density districts, R4, R5, and so forth, there's also a significant amount of yard changes, which affect being able to build or enlarge low density homes.
Did you say it was inhibit the building of
Would
those homes?
encourage.
Encourage. Gotcha. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you're right. So, the rear yard requirement going from 30 to 20, that allows you to move that additional bump of 0.5 to 0.75 FAR into that rear yard
Do
portion.
you have a chart to that effect?
I think that low density one he just pulled up has, I think, a summary of that. Were we on
I
slide
don't believe
55?
rear yards are included in this table, but we can provide something in the future.
Yeah, we have another slide, a cache of appendix slides that provides some prototypical examples that we can follow up with.
Well, there's one in the EIS table 10 minimum.
Oh, this is the one I was hoping you had. Yeah, this one is helpful too, actually.
Yeah.
So what was that, slide 56? So yeah, we have rear yard requirement minimum, reduced side yard minimum at least 5 feet provided. Now, a lot of these single family detached typologies, where you're deciding to still provide parking, you're still going to want to provide width for that parking there. But you're still at least a minimum of 5 foot. You have higher height allowances. So in these some of these contextual low density districts, R2 is not very prevalent here, but where the perimeter wall was 21 feet, we're rising that to 25 feet and keeping that 35 maximum height, so you could fit that FAR. So yeah, it's primarily that rear yard where you're fitting that in the side yard. And most importantly is that lot size area. So you would be able to build in these lots that were currently too small to build, would then become available to be actually built what the underlying zoning would allow.
Is that it, Jerry?
Well, I was very curious about the shared units that struck me. And what's the difference between a shared unit realistically and an Airbnb?
Well, I mean, I could tell you that Airbnbs are not allowed in what I think, unless they're less than 30 days. I forget what that there's
30 days.
Yeah, so that's beyond what zoning rules are. The shared housing are intended to be permanent housing for some folks.
Right.
And
I'll
they're
tell
not-
you what the problem is. Typically throughout the city of New York, when you have an Airbnb or even illegal apartments, the boarder or whatever it is locks his door
Mhm.
because it's not a family. Soon as that additional person shared apartment puts a lock, a deadbolt to protect his own goods in his own apartment, to the city of New York today, I'm talking about building department.
Yeah.
That's an Airbnb. How will that change? I mean, was that thought through?
I mean, you still would not be able to rent out these units as for short-term rentals. Existing laws that would still apply to these units. And yeah, I think when there's distinction between the shared units and a typical apartment is you're allowed to have a lock on your bedroom that leads to the communal space, whereas if you're a roommate typology of 2-bedroom apartment, you can't lock those bedrooms. So those are still the laws for, I think, housing maintenance code, I believe, that would still apply. That would not be changed.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to questions. Evie?
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Colin, for providing the street info for our district. That was helpful just in seeing where things are happening. I guess I mean, I have a lot of questions and kind of need to process this. It's a lot. But in terms of the infill as well, specifically around NYCHA and public land, is there any requirement regarding affordability for anything that would be developed on those on that public land?
I mean, I know the campus changes would not facilitate privatization of NYCHA. So it would make it easy for NYCHA to do infill housing development on campuses. So today, NYCHA must get zoning overrides every time they want to do affordable and senior housing, which sort of can take away the time and money for them. So I believe if they were to use UAP on sites, they would have some requirements there. But I think we might have, unless Colin, you know offhand, might have to follow up on what income restrictions would apply to the infill on whether it's NYCHA or like a co-op or any campus site.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there isn't any requirement, and that also probably wouldn't be required under this proposal, though I do know that should NYCHA choose to do this on a campus, they often are requiring at least some kind of mixed income or deep affordability options for those construction. But that effectively would be a decision that NYCHA would have to make and would require actually a lot of input from the residents of that campus.
Exactly. And that, obviously because it's NYCHA being the developer here, they can control what can and can't happen. They're generally looking towards these developments that have significant income restricted units.
And I guess just continuing along, with the whole issue of affordability and Shahnaz's comment, in the chat, right? And we look to see how much housing has been built in Astoria and Long Island City, and it hasn't lowered anybody's rent. If anything, we've seen a tremendous increase in rent, and everything that's been built, predominantly has been expensive market rate. And so I guess, I'm questioning just how much affordable housing this proposal is going to yield. And, even things like reducing, the parking requirement, we've seen here that developers still include it. They can apply for waivers now and they don't do it, right? Because they are building a specific kind of housing for people who can also afford to have cars and pay $500 a month for a parking space, right? In their building. So I just question actually how much more truly affordable housing we're going to get through these proposals. And then also, I guess, so that's just a comment, right? That's not really a question. Although actually, if there's a projection for actually how much,
Yeah.
I'd like to actually see that. That would be great. And like, what's the data to back that up?
Yeah, so this project required, we had that draft scope of work back quite some time ago because this project was subject to an EIS. And we had to look toward projected how many units would develop here. And again, this is, the large geography, sort of the special sauce here, and sort of the little housing everywhere. And the projections are that there would be upwards between 60 and 110,000 units across the entirety of the city. And about 22,000 of those would be income restricted units. And even further beyond that, for just like the density of that, that breaks down to about an average, just under an average of 1 unit per acre over the next 15 years. And again, back to Colin talking about like some of these development proposals, these fixes don't seem like large steps forward, but in some it provides additional housing. So, and it's not just the income restricted units, it's the additional housing production, which is really the primary issue that has contributed to the housing costs rising, which is the lack of housing production leading directly to it. And directly to her question about how can we, with no common high rent, how can we rent these apartments, which I think is related to, I guess, setting a maximum rental. So the income restricted units do have maximum numbers, and we are providing through the UAP an averaging allowance for up to at 60%, whereas the voluntary program didn't allow an averaging. So you could have as low as 30 up to 90%. I think we're capping it at 100%. We acknowledge that the 130% AMIs from some of the MIH proposals don't provide that degree of affordability that neighborhoods across the city want. And the UAP doesn't allow that. It brings that tiers downwards towards average of 60%. So that's essentially half of that maximum of 130% that is allowed from, I think that's the number used by like the old 421A and some of the other options.
So now there's 485X, right? And so how does this kind of factor into, affordability? And then, so that's, because I actually attended a webinar recently and kind of looked at what 485X, allows. And then when you add UAP on top of that, you actually get a disproportionate increase of market rate units as compared to the affordable units when you kind of overlay those two things. So, which you'd think you'd actually be getting a greater proportion of affordable units when you combine those two things together, but that wasn't the case. So I guess, I don't know if you can answer that now.
Yeah, sure. So existence of 485X, absolutely critical for the production of any new mixed income rental housing in New York. And this includes developments under this UAP. So units that are permanently affordable at an average of 60% AMI under UAP would also qualify for buildings under 485X. However, any units with higher AMIs, like those at 80% AMI, would not qualify for UAP unless the developments also include that lower AMI to bring that to an average of 60% AMI. So UAP is forcing that average to come down. It will guarantee deeper affordability, more so than what 485 would allow for almost all of those.
And then just last question. So let's just say I'm a developer. I want to actually rezone, right? So I applied for a rezoning to go from whatever to whatever.
Yep.
Once that rezoning is done, I can then tack on the UAP, and then add another 20%.
No, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious as to what that process is like, because we're also, we're going through some rezonings now. So when those rezonings are done, can the developer then say, well, you know what, now I want to add the UAP to that, right? Because it fits within, the mid density kind of thing. So now I want to add another 20%, is that a scenario that could happen?
No, it's a really good question. It's questions we had as we were sort of learning the text over in the past. So it's not something you could double up on. So if you were to do a rezoning and it triggers a significant amount of housing, as policy, we establish these MIH areas. That is a mandatory program that rides along with a rezoning. UAP is replacing the voluntary inclusionary housing program. It's its own program. So MIH would still apply and has similar 20% increases in floor area, but you couldn't also add UAP to get additional floor area. So that those floor area numbers are essentially, I believe they line up around the same. So like for R6A, 3.9 under MIH, it would be 3.9 for UAP. And what Colin's bringing up here is, some things that come up is concerns about the degree of the affordability. Option one, option 3 oftentimes wasn't used because you couldn't use it as a standalone option. It would require 20% set aside and an average of 40% AMI. This something was requested by several council members across the city. Something I already talked about here about equalizing those MIH levels with UAP, where UAP is higher. So some districts R6A, it's 3.9 with heirs, but it's 3.6 for MIH. We're equalizing it. We're bringing them all to 3.9. So that's sort of just showing the trying to distinguish between UAP and MIH, different programs.
Thank you. I'm going to have to rewatch this.
Absolutely. I just wrote down the timestamp of this section so that I can go back to it. So, yeah, please, everybody, don't panic. We'll figure it out. And we'll be able to put it into some kind of form that, will be understandable. I'm hoping. Okay, Richard has your hand up. You have your hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, we can.
Yes, good. Okay, I have just a general comment to make. I like the fact that this proposal is citywide and not specific to specific areas of the city. And the reason behind this is in a way is related to something which is a policy of the city only related to public buildings, but I think it should also relate to private buildings, and that's fair share criteria. Fair share, I think, which says that regardless of the area of the city, the responsibility for, in this case, for public buildings and things like that should be shared equally amongst all districts. And I think that this should be actually morphed into public or to private buildings too. Most of the opposition to this program has been coming from the low district areas like Eastern Queens and places like this, when they're all up in arms about it because they think it's somehow going to lose their Long Island feel. My opinion about that is if they really like Long Island, they should secede, go to Long Island and pay the higher property taxes.
I'll admit I live in Long Island, but don't hold that against me.
Don't be too mean on them, okay?
In general, I would think we've seen too much of the responsibility of this fall on like our district, one of the districts that's had the majority of construction and building and disruption in our neighborhood. We've been living with this for years, and it needs to be shared. I think that if people look up fair share, you know, and even though, like I say, it's for public buildings, they should be also applying to private buildings. I mean, if this continues, this is like a modern form of redlining. And I really don't think that we deserve this. And I really think that this should be extended to the whole, all of the city. And I don't think that these other areas in with all the single family homes, the low density areas should be allowed to shirk their responsibility. So that's just my statement. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And one thing I just want to know, I added to the chat, you know, Liz was concerned about, you know, the way these are displayed and shown, whether it's the slides. We have this illustrated guide on our website that provides more detail. It aggregates some of the illustrations that we have in the presentation today and some additional numbers. So I think that is a good tool for folks on the call and the community board. It's on our website for the general public as well. We think it's really helpful. And to you, sir, about the concerns about making sure this is shared across, you know, and you know, the text amendment is, you know, again, trying to enable housing everywhere, not just in CB1. And it's to include high market areas that have experienced little new housing development because of zoning constraints. So like the TOD allows new housing development to occur in commercial corridors in Eastern Queens and South Queens and Central Queens. It allows development near transit that couldn't be built today throughout the city. And you know, noting the impact in CB1, Southern Queens, especially also have really felt the brunt of producing this housing for the rest of the city. The goal here is to provide it throughout. Again, you know, it's again the 1 unit per acre over the next 15 years. Again, it doesn't seem consequential, but it is intended to be spread out across the city. So it isn't impacted in one area or the other. But I think all your points were
certainly it's impacted District 1 because I mean, I read somewhere in this mass of EAS or EIS that we have sustained, we had the third highest in the city, the third highest number of new units that have been built in the last 10 years, I think it is. And it is a problem, which is why what I want to do is focus on the impacts that this is going to have on our district, you know, and we just run the gamut of all of the zoning districts, which in our district, which makes it very difficult to make that kind of an assessment. So, you know, it boils down to whether or not we agree that this is the way to go. You know, reducing the size of lots, increasing the heights of buildings, things like that. The question is, how is it going to affect the characteristics and the context of the neighborhoods that we have now? And how effective is it going to be to have existing development reconstructed by adding? You know, how likely is that to happen? I mean, I don't know. This is something that, you know, Jerry could probably speak to, but, you know, it kind of frightens me a bit, the potential that this has for existing development and existing neighborhoods. But that, you know, we'll go through it with an even, you know, have an unbiased approach on it. Amy, you had your hand up? Yes.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You know, the material that's on screen right now, this deck seems to be a little bit more detailed than the abbreviated version that's on the city website. Is this somewhere available on the website, or can you send it to us?
I'll be sharing a PDF version at the end.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more details here than those abbreviated illustrated guides. And unlike Jerry, I don't know if I have time to read 1,100 pages, but this is very helpful with some of the details that are in here. Thank you.
And I would suggest also that you go to Appendix A of the EIS that's on the website. It's in the link that I gave you.
Okay.
On the city, the ZAP portal. On the
okay,
ZAP.
Great. Okay, thank you.
That really has all of these matrices, you know, all of the comparison numbers.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
It explains it fully. Okay,
Cool.
Richard,
Thank
again.
you.
Richard, or is that your hand?
Dan? This is Dan.
Well,
Am I on?
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, my question is two parts. You mentioned earlier about the shared residences. Would that be in any district, or are those restricted to one area? And you mentioned about supported or supportive housing. Is that in those same areas? And the other part of it is this really like the old-fashioned rooming houses we had of 100 years ago?
Yes.
They're modeled after that with more requirements in terms of amenities and space requirements, but that is a similar housing type that we're trying to emulate here.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's the supportive housing.
Yeah, could you rephrase or restate your question about supportive housing?
Yeah, you mentioned, I don't hear whether it was supported or supportive housing earlier, and I wasn't clear on what areas those were going to be appropriate for.
So I think the proposals, so has several components that increase FAR and allow additional flexibility for supportive housing. It significantly increases, as of right, supportive housing FARs across those districts that have UAP. In the few districts such as R6, R7-2, where community facilities can achieve higher FARs than residential through a special permit, more supportive housing would be allowed by an authorization. So you can seek this authorization to do additional higher FARs that go up to, I think, the community facility number. So this also provides sort of simpler process to it. It would make it quicker, less expensive to build new supportive housing.
And it's supportive or supported?
Oh, I'm supportive, IVE.
Supportive, okay. And what about supported? Is there any facility for supported housing?
Colin, I don't know if you're familiar with that
They're
terminology.
a little more functioning, a little higher functioning folks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we make a distinction in this proposal between those two types of housing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Good question, though. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry?
I have another question, because you mentioned in the universal affordable preferences, you equated it to AIRS. AIRS has had no density factor. And the slide you have up right now, it says you eliminated density factor. You called it dwelling unit factor. Is that across the board that you eliminated density?
So the dwelling unit factor is either eliminated or reduced. Let's see. Let me see if I have a note on the number specifically, but so I know in many districts you have a dwelling unit factor of 680, and I know a lot of the medium high density districts is going down to 500. So that allows you to build more with similar FARs, more units. Let's see. I think, and we may have a slide on this, right, Colin?
On the dwelling unit factor?
I thought we did. Yes, I think on. So go to slide 58. I think.
Sure. Right.
So the R1s to R4B, it would be 500. R32, which that's the first district that allows multifamily. So it's currently 870. It would go to 500 across the board here. 680 is very typical, R6 through R10. That would go down to 500. Now that's not minimum size of units. That is the factor for everyone. That's the factor you use where you divide the maximum zoning floor area by this factor. And that's the amount of units you can produce. There's other regulations beyond zoning that limits the size of units. But that's the tool that is used to dictate how many units can be generated on a site. So
Right.
floor area, lower
just to clarify, Scott, for the members, when you're doing a building, there's typically today several factors, but the ones that hurt the most are the density and the parking. Because the more units you have, the more parking required. So if you don't have a parking requirement, and I have an R5 zone, and I could do two FAR, I think that's, no, one FAR, and I have a 50 by 100 lot, so I have 5,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet divided by 500, you're gonna have 10 units. Just to put in simple terms. So a 40 by 100 lot in Astoria with no parking.
So we're not taking away the build parking, but we are making it optional across. So we're
Who's
not.
gonna put it?
Well, you know, we from, oh, sorry, go ahead, Colin.
On a
No,
small unit, they're not gonna do it. On a big unit, to market it, they will definitely do big buildings. They'll have some parking. But on small, 3-family, 5-family, especially near a train station, why would you? You can market those apartments easily without the parking.
yeah, definitely, Jerry. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to encourage here.
Exactly.
So it's closer we get to transit, the less car dependency we need, the less space we need to be accommodating for cars.
And if the developer sees a demand for parking, they will adjust to that market and provide it where they believe there's strong demand for it.
Correct. Thank you.
I really appreciate the way you talk through it, because it's really helpful to understand and demystify a lot of these zoning things. So you know, just aside from everything, I appreciate the way you provide background on this. It's really helpful.
Yeah, he's the keeper.
Yeah.
On the committee. We had a question in the chat about the impact that this is going to have on services and you know, not only the infrastructure, but community facilities. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so the EIS requires to look at certain sections. There were components that triggered that were identified in this draft scope of work, in the final scope of work, one of those was community facilities. So we are taking a look between the release of the scope to the filed as this goes through at how we can provide to mitigate the impact on schools. More people will provide needs for schools, but because again, the geography is such an important context of this, it is the increment is much lower across the city. So there will be impacts, and that was identified in the EIS, and it's something that will be looked at from now until the end of the referral period.
Yeah, I know there was a whole section in there that talked about all of the things that we're just not going to be able to, in the POS deck, we're not going to be able to be either analyzed or mitigated. I don't know. I just got it the other day. So
yeah, so there, I think there's yeah, we could follow up on that. There's certain sections that in an EIS will say that you know may not have mitigation available. But I think we could follow up. I think maybe one of the slides in the appendix provides some context to that. Actually, I think it's slide. Did you include it in this one?
Not sure if I have that one, but we can follow up with you, Liz.
Yeah.
okay, because by the time we have the meeting, the public hearing, you'll get questions from them also about impact, but at least we'll be able to go to what's been written so far, but
Sure, and I can provide some background on that, and we will follow up with this. But so the DS said, so it says we cannot, the DEIS cannot preclude impacts in the following categories, and that's shadows. So there's going to be impact when you have taller buildings, historical cultural resources, which is I'm not really as fine-tuned in how deep those sections get into. Urban design, visual resources, because there's a change in that neighborhood landscape. Natural resources, hazard materials, noise, and construction. So those are the things that are categories that, because of the likelihood, depends on specific site characteristics, could not preclude impacts. The DS identifies no impacts in categories including land use, zoning, and policy, socioeconomic conditions, water, sewer infrastructure, solid waste, sanitation, energy, air quality, public health, neighborhood character, and it does identify significant adverse impacts to be looked at, community facilities and services, and they specifically call it early childhood programs in schools, and primarily because we're providing this new mechanisms to allow young families to move into these areas. Open space, because there's some areas that have limited open space. So we're working with DPR for them to provide some mitigation to provide, higher ratio of open space to new units, and transportation. So we're looking at the traffic, transit, and pedestrians. So these were identified and will be identified in the final EIS.
Okay. But that's not coming, when is that due to come out? I forgot the process.
Yeah,
Is
It was 10 days before.
10 days before the public hearing?
we could follow up with more detail. That might be, so there's a comment process that have with the draft scope. Then the applicant, DCP, will also receive it at the hearing. So the public hearing for this that will occur ideally right now in July would be the same simultaneous hearing with the EIS.
Okay.
And between that hearing and the city CPC approving, they have to address all these comments between that time.
Okay. So it's approximately the same time as the hearing. Okay.
Yeah, and we can provide a better schematic on that layout, but that's my understanding from a recent EIS.
All right. Any other questions for the gentlemen now who are here tonight? No? Okay. I want to thank you very much for the time and the information. I thank you for the screen too.
Liz, I actually wanted to and check in with you in Florence. I know we had mentioned a second committee meeting in May, and I was following up to see if that has been arranged yet.
Yeah, I thought, I don't know. I if it is something, we have to get our heads around this to see how we're going to be dealing with this. So we just held off on we held the 15th, but we'll see what happens. We won't be hearing, the board won't be voting on this until June. So we do have our June 6th meeting to talk about this. So we may not have to have another meeting in between. And if we do, it might be just comments by email or something like that, put this in, don't do that, whatever. So, and if there are issues that come up, we will forward them to you, Colin, and, you can, and so Scott, you can address them.
Yeah, that sounds great. I would urge if there's an ability to keep that over email until the June committee meeting, just seeing that we have a lot of commitments in presenting this proposal to our other boards and our Long Island City study. So just in terms of capacity constraints on our side, we're just trying to be cognizant of that. I'm happy to attend our scheduled meetings as they exist today, but as I've noted to you in Florence, I'm actually going to be out on the day of the 15th.
Right,
so
right.
We're going to be looking for coverage for that if it's necessary, but we're trying to avoid asking too much of folks who are already putting in a lot of hours to present this presentation to other boards. And I guess with that, I'm wondering if you would prefer that we bring this to the board after you've had a second chance to talk about it in June.
No, I
instead of
don't
in May.
think so. I think we want to, at least from my part, I don't know about Andreas and Jerry. I would like to know what the board is, needs clarification on, so that by June we can communicate with them before they vote. I think they should have at least, a few weeks to mull the presentation over. This is a lot to grasp, even for people who are in the profession. And, just learning things for the first time is going to be difficult for them. So I would like to keep to, Evie, you can weigh in here. I would like to keep the presentation in May for the board, and then we can have the vote in June. Because by then they'll have our report and they will have had time to research what they were concerned about. So,
and we have until July when to actually vote? What's the actual final? Not that I'm encouraging a July meeting, but I just think it's good to know what the actual deadline is.
Yeah, I
Yes.
didn't have the deadline for the ULURP.
It's a 60-day referral and it went out on the 29th of April. So I'll have to work backwards to figure out what the exact date is.
Yeah, so just a minor thing there. So the transmittal generally occurs about like
Thank you.
9 days later, and it may occur between the end of tonight, which is 9 days after the 29th. So that clock actually doesn't start until probably tonight, which brings you into all of your May and all of your June dates.
Right, right.
And we will continue to accept, obviously, just like CEO and CN carbon neutrality, the recommendations up until, you know, generally before the vote by the CPC, but we always will and have accepted the recommendations at your convenience. Generally, so if the hearings in July, so around July, we would still accept it.
Yeah. Well, we had our recommendations on the other two in there before the public hearing of the city planning. They were late, but they were, you know, they got there before.
Absolutely, yeah.
But-
No, you don't get demerits from city planning for being
Yeah,
late.
yeah.
Yeah,
We-
absolutely.
What is, I forgot what it's called. It's not,
Non-compliance.
it is non-compliance with ULURP, so.
Yeah, but the commission won't be like, oh, this is given late. We're not going to consider this to the same degree as this board. You know, we want you to be able to take a deep dive at it.
You could fire us all. That's okay. You know? Okay, so I want to thank you again, gentlemen. It wore me out, let me tell you. So, and we'll be in touch. Again, we'll see you on the 21st.
Yes. Thanks, Liz, and thank you, everybody. Looking
Okay.
forward to speaking more.
Thank you again. Okay,
Liz, through the chair?
Yep.
Would you consider taking copy of this tonight, tomorrow morning, having it emailed when it's put up on YouTube to the entire board so they can review it with a note on it? I think that it would be most beneficial to take the YouTube and send it to the board and encourage them to review it starting tomorrow so that they'll have the copy, they have the deck on the copy, and they have the verbiage with it, with all of the work that you guys have done tonight.
yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. My question is there a transcript that's going to be available with it? Do you know?
I have all my notes, Liz.
I mean, we should be able to download.
I have the transcript from this meeting, but it takes 3 days to get, yes.
Okay, all right. 3 days is fine. Okay, yeah, so well, we'll discuss about what goes out, you know, Evie has to approve what goes out to the board. I think it's fine, you know.
I think a transcript would be good to send out to the board. In addition to the YouTube link.
In addition to YouTube, like, okay.
Oh, yeah, it's much, yeah, they have to see the slides. And, okay. All right. Moving on.
Colin is going to send us the PDF, right? He said he would send us the PDF of the slide deck.
I sent him an email asking for it already. I sent it before you guys even asked for it. I keep them for the minutes.
Is it in the chat? I thought he put something in the chat.
I saved that too. I don't know what it is. I didn't look at it. I just saved the links. I have them emailed to the office.
Okay. So moving on, old business, 21st Street rezoning. Anything you want to add to the report for the board?
Well, I mean, for me, the only thing is that going back to the reason to purchase one of these as opposed to, renting a stabilized, affordable unit as opposed to buying is, I guess, that if you do sell this, you do recover all of your purchase price plus cost of living increases. So I guess that makes sense, because if you rent, you never get that back. So I guess that would be the reason behind it, to go through the mortgage process and all that kind of stuff. But I really am a little concerned about the how this is going to work with the maintenance fees and the fact that they're not going to be paid for. And I don't know how a lot of these boards are going to be, the boards are going to deal with the fact that their market rate units are going to have to cover the maintenance fees for the the affordable units. That's just my only thoughts. It could be a problem down the road, but the whole concept I think is good though.
Well,
I think it would also be helpful to include that MIH home ownership document that Jordan had prepared and we all got a copy of, explaining how the like affordable, like the condo sales go on. And you know, I think that document did a good job explaining the basics as to how that operates. So I think it'd be useful if everybody else gets to see that as well.
yeah, the board, you mean? Because I already said.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I took a look, but I think the full board could also benefit from seeing it as well.
Okay. All right. Now we had the other item that's on the public hearing agenda on the 21st is the guy who didn't show up. 37, you know, the 12th Street rezoning. There was a mix-up in the schedule and everything, so that's going to be the hearing for that night. And I don't recall any issues that we had with that. It's a small development compared to what we're used to seeing. So, and I think he is, I don't have the information in front of me, but I think it is an option 1. Okay, so that's coming up. Now you got 2 sets of minutes, April 3rd and January 10th. That should be January 10th. That was a mistake. I'll correct that. Are there any other corrections on either one of them that need to be done? I sent the January 24 because it had the 21st Street rezoning on it. So no changes, no objections. I'm not asking for approval. Okay, that's great. All right, I don't have anything else. Is there any other issue anyone wants to bring up?
No, I just want to bring up just with the comment. I don't know who the person was who commented just about notifying the community and stuff like that. I guess I just want to make sure that we are, you know, posting on our social media, doing what we can to make sure that people know about these, you know, all the land use projects or any committee meetings that we have. So I don't know to what extent people in the neighborhood do know about this project. I'm sure some do, but I don't think a lot of people do. So that's all.
In the neighborhood, you mean in the whole district? That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's citywide, you know.
No, I'm talking about the 21st Street rezoning.
Oh,
not City of Yes. Yeah. I'm talking about like specific projects.
Okay. All right, I'm still under the weight of ZHO, sorry. Okay. If that's it, can somebody adjourn the meeting? Will we just say goodbye? Good night?
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
I second it.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Elizabeth
We'll be in touch.
and Andreas and Jerry and everybody. Good night.
We'll talk to you soon.
Good night.
Bye-bye.